subscribe to our videos so that more people can hear the Word of God.
Good morning and welcome to Wednesday and welcome to 5 Minutes in the Word with God. And we are in the trial of Jesus, just hours away from his crucifixion and death. So before we get into today's passage is John 18, 28, 38, and we're going to look at this interaction with Pilate. But before that, you just need to know the timeline. So Annas had Jesus in his courtroom, so to speak, and then he sent him off to Caiaphas. So, but what you need to know here is John doesn't record that interaction. So if you're interested in that, that's found in Matthew 57 through 68. So he doesn't mention that. It's just, and there's also a hasty assembly of council, and that's recorded there too. All right. And then there's the one before the Sanhedrin, and that's recorded in Luke 22:66. So Jesus goes to the Sanhedrin, he goes to a council, he's with Caiaphas, all of that. But what John really wants to spend time in his record of this situation is with the interaction with Pilate. All right, so join me as I read John 18, 28 through 38. Then the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. But now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanliness, they did not enter the palace, because they wanted to eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and asked, "What charges are you bringing against the man?" "If he were not a criminal," they replied, "we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." "But we have no right to execute anyone," they objected. This took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death he was about to die. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Is that your own idea?" Jesus asked, "or did others talk to you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What it is that you have done?" Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place." "You are a king, then?" said Pilate. Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." "What is truth?" retorted Pilate. With this, he went out again to the Jews gathered there and said, "I find no basis for a charge against him." All right, so let's unpack these 10 verses. So here we go. The statement, so John loves to record irony. And so here, the Jewish leaders, they can't go into the palace, because if they go into the palace, they would be defiled and they wouldn't be able to have Passover. Again, there's not supposed to be any trial during Passover. So it's funny, right, that John showed irony here to show the hypocrisy of the religious leaders, right? Because they're willing to break all these rules in the way that they were going about trying Jesus, but they didn't want to defile themselves, so they couldn't go into the palace. So sometimes it's true, like we as believers, maybe we focus on something that is really, we think, oh, this is where I'm going to die on. But then we forget all these other things, right? You see, this is important, but what about loving your enemies? And what about forgiving people? But you say, no, I want to do this, right? So anyway, John recorded their irony here. So the religious leaders felt pretty good of bringing Jesus to Pilate, because, what I didn't realize this either, history presents Pilate as a cruel, ruthless man. So basically they were hoping that in Pilate's cruelty and basically ruthlessness, that he would be willing to do what they wanted to have done, and that was to have Jesus crucified. Because again, the Jewish religious leaders were not allowed to execute anybody under the Roman law. Only the Romans were able to do that. So then we see Pilate has this initial interaction with Jesus, and he says this statement, "I find no fault in him." And so what I want you to think about the statement says, "I find no fault in him." He doesn't just say that he isn't guilty of a crime worthy of death, but he says no fault means he's innocent. Here's this innocent man that you are wanting to condemn to death. So it's not even someone that deserves any charges and to go to jail or anything, because he is completely innocent. So these are the terms that this is what Pilate is able to see. Because Pilate, again, he knew political revolutionaries. And in that interaction with Jesus, he could see that Jesus was not a political revolutionary. So we're going to go deeper into more interactions with Pilate and Jesus, and we'll see a little bit about his character and what he's, his part in this story. So have a good day, and we'll see you tomorrow. And remember, 5 minutes in the Word can change your life.